everybody. I'm so excited to be here, and I definitely wish we were in sunny San Diego right now, but we'll take what we can get, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you in person next year. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Bruns, and I am the Clinical Patient Engagement Liaison at PTC Therapeutics. We are a biopharmaceutical company focused on innovative small molecule and gene therapies for rare genetic disorders. I'm really proud to be part of a company where patient centricity is not just a buzzword, but a true standard of excellence in everything that we do. And our teams are committed to one single purpose: to extend life's moments for patients with rare diseases and their loved ones. My role at PTC is unique, and it demonstrates our commitment to patients during the drug development process. My responsibility is to ensure that the patient perspective is included throughout each step. From research to approval, we're focused on partnering with patients and communities. And a key involvement in this is with clinical trials. From design to enrollment, we work under a motto of ever better. And today I'm going to show you how PTC is using Elevate to take our patient engagement in clinical trials to a new level. Next slide, please. So our first step in Elevate is early engagement. And we all know this: the earlier, the better. But this begins with building an internal foundation of partnering with our cross-functional teams. So from clinical, operations, research, commercial development, and even strategic marketing, it's imperative that patient engagement is part of the conversations and planning with these teams. So creating a culture of patient engagement can be done across the entire company in a variety of ways. So we've been fortunate to bring in patients, caregivers, and advocacy group leaders to speak to our company on a global level about their experience, either as a patient or running an advocacy group. And while COVID has shifted these to virtual discussions, the effect is still just as powerful. Teams that typically would not be around a patient have had the opportunity to see and hear directly how a rare disease affects that person that is sharing their story. We've heard from so many colleagues how powerful this has been, to know that what they are doing, everyone from legal to finance, is helping in furthering the overall goal of finding potential treatments for patients. As a caregiver and a former nonprofit leader, I can tell you how meaningful this is to have a company do this. In rare, it's not often that anyone knows what disease you're facing. So when you find a company that not only knows and understands the disease, but is actively doing all that they can on their side, it's an amazing sense of both relief and hope, because you know that someone cares. So if you're watching this from the industry side, please make sure you're finding opportunities to bring your community in. And if you're watching this from the advocacy or a patient or caregiver side, make sure you're working with your advocacy group to be able to share your story. Our insights into patient communities and interactions with families help us identify the needs as well as the strengths. Partnering with these teams allow the patient perspective to be included at the very beginning and every step of the way. Establishing an early connection with the advocacy groups and community provides the chance to create meaningful relationships to further inspire the work being done. When we involve patients early on in our drug development programs, we get valuable insights and can understand the unique challenges that help us design the most effective solutions to meet our patients' needs. Okay, next slide, please. So listening is a key step in Elevate. So early in the development of one of our drug candidates, our team established a relationship with a patient advocacy group that supported people living with this disease. Through the group, we were able to meet directly with patients and caregivers to learn about the patient journey, the challenges of living with the condition, and the unmet needs from their perspective. We learned that our assumptions regarding the preferred route of administration was different from what the patients wanted. This is something that we would have never known if we hadn't talked to them. These relationships help build trust between PTC and the community, and were a positive influence in recruiting when we went into the clinic. This quote is one that I've loved for a long time. One of the sincerest forms of respect is actually listening to what another has to say. And this always has been and will be kind of a guide to how we interact with our families. We know how smart families are when it comes to their disease. We recognize the many hours that they have spent researching, talking to physicians, and compiling information like genetic test results, tracking symptoms in journals, research articles, and more. And even so, much more is their firsthand knowledge of living with the disease. As a patient or caregiver, this unique perspective cannot be ignored. Our role in patient engagement is to listen to them, hear what they are saying, and also what they are not saying. I once had a parent tell me, if you could only see what 24 hours with my child looked like. And she's absolutely right. We do want to see that because that's how we learn best, by listening to those who are living it every single day. Next slide, please. So setting appropriate expectations is another step. As a sponsor, we may run into challenges in timelines or potential adjustments to the trial. And where and when we are able, it's important that we maintain transparency and communication with our patients and our advocacy groups. We also work to ensure that those interested in participating in the clinical trial have a true understanding of the expectations that come with being part of the trial. Our goal is that when someone is considering participating in a trial, that they fully understand the documents, the procedures, and the steps that the trial will go through. We also make sure that they know who their key contacts are so that they can answer any questions that are met in a timely manner to meet their needs. We're also striving to not only meet, but to exceed the expectations of communities typically underrepresented in clinical trials. As a company, we're focused on providing diversity and equality in everything we do, and that includes our studies. We've formed working groups, we've met with diverse populations, and we're ensuring that even the act of translating a document from English to another language is not just the text, but is also approached with cultural considerations. Next slide, please. So value. So the value in our Elevate process shows our commitment to our patients. When we're designing a trial, we understand that the simplest thing a patient experiences can have a huge impact on the data while participating in a study. In one of our programs, we learned that from holding a caregiver advisory board, that those living with this disease have a hard time sleeping and that travel can have a direct impact on this. It's important that we understand that if a patient is traveling for a study, that we may need to modify arrangements to make time for them to settle in before they come to the site. We heard from caregivers that one of the most meaningful results of a potential treatment would be the ability for the patient to better communicate their needs. While this may not be an endpoint that was initially under consideration, we know now that this detail would dramatically affect the life of not only the patient, but their caregiver and their circle of support. As advocates for the rare disease community, it's crucial for us to understand these perspectives and partner with our clinical research teams to consider all possible endpoints. All right, next slide, please. So without true action, patient centricity is just a buzzword. Sometimes we hear that a little too often, but it's a critical part in our Elevate plan. So one of my favorite quotes is, "The measure of who we are is what we do with what we have." Our role as patient engagement leaders is to think outside that box, to take the information that we have and work with our cross-functional teams to create actionable items from the patient's perspectives. For example, knowing what the study participant needs when they are on site. Considerations need to be taken for everything, including the amount of noise, light, even the overall energy of the site. In getting to know the patients, we see that the smallest details can have a large impact on our study. We learned from one community that many of their pediatric patients do not like to be touched. So we ensure in the design in the trial that tests, like a simple blood draw, are done by someone with extreme quickness and accuracy. Designing a clinical trial with the patient perspective in mind not only adds to the success of the trial, but more importantly, it creates a positive experience for the patient and their family. An area that is very important to me is addressing the mental health of the families participating in our clinical trials. we know that there are many emotions to navigate during a clinical trial. Fear, worry, and urgency to have time on your side. These are all very real and only just a few of them that are out there. We're creating programs that will address ways to first recognize that they're not alone in feeling like this, and then providing resources to real solutions to help every step of the way, every emotion that is there. Juggling work, traveling to and from appointments, taking care of others at home, and still managing the day-to-day happenings of life. It's a lot. And as a sponsor, we're all grateful for those who are participating in studies. We know it can't be easy, and we want to take action to help ease that burden. It's using this type of information to think outside the box, to develop resources and programs for all those who are involved in the study, everyone from patients to clinicians to even site coordinators. Next slide, please. So another component in our Elevate plan is to teach. So let's put ourselves in a caregiver's shoes for a moment. You've just received a diagnosis for your loved one. In the middle of trying to understand all this new terminology and the changes that this diagnosis is going to be bringing, you discover that they may be a candidate for a new trial. The time is very sensitive to enroll. If a caregiver does not understand what a clinical trial is or how it works, they could be very hesitant. In working with multiple rare disease communities, we found an underlying theme of the need for more education on the fundamentals of a clinical trial. Our patient engagement team partnered with clinical operations to develop a 3-part video series and a roadmap on what a clinical trial is. From understanding what each phase means, who is involved, and the questions to ask when considering a trial, we will be working with our advocacy groups to help educate their families and empowering them to be advocates for research. Building this foundation helps all families better understand what treatment options are available and how to make clinical trials part of their care plan discussions. However, before we can even ask them to consider participating in a trial, we want them to fully understand the science behind it. I'm excited that next year we'll be launching a program that will be bridging the gap between our science and our patients. We know that not everyone comes from a scientific background. This disease is new. No one signed up for this. And we know that it can be very unfamiliar, unsettling, and frustrating at times. So at our earliest engagement, we want our families to be part of this drug development process and teach them how every part moves. From discovery to approval, we'll be teaching our families the science. Next slide, please. So the bookend to Elevate is experience. No one knows a rare disease greater than those who are living it. A rare disease diagnosis affects not only the patient, but their family and their friends. And their experiences are taken into great consideration by our teams. Many of our rare disease patients experience disability as a result of their conditions. For example, those people living with Duchenne muscular dystrophy often lose mobility function and use wheelchairs. Those with AADC deficiency suffer from movement disorders such as dystonia or hypokinesia. In speaking with those living with those disorders and caregivers, we're able to better understand the complications associated with the disease and incorporate those into the clinical trial design. Understanding their experiences and needs is very powerful. Next slide, please. So the power of patient perspective in rare disease drug development is a necessity, and it's something that we all know, and it should be the driving force in each phase. When we involve our patients early on, when we partner with multiple teams across and inside the company, we gain valuable insights, can understand the unique situations to meet the patient's needs. We can ensure that clinical trials are effective and that endpoints are considered. The only way to understand what it's like to live with a rare disease is to hear directly from the patients. Their value is unmeasurable, and they're the most important stakeholders in our work. Thank you so much for joining me today, learning how we're using Elevate process to take our patient engagement in clinical trials to a new level. And let's jump over to see if there are any questions from everyone here. I can launch this. Thank you. Okay. So one of the question is, can you clarify by what you mean by early engagement? At what stage of development do you recommend bringing patient advocacy groups in to provide feedback or to share their experiences? Is there such a thing as engaging too early? No, I don't think so. I think that there is, every group's going to be different. And I think depending on the timing and where you are at in the study, there's going to be a variation. So I don't think it's necessarily like an one answer. But I think that the earliest you can get involved, just to even make introductions and start to learn from the community, is extremely important. Okay, someone asked where we can find the educational videos on drug development and clinical trials. Those will be launching up on our website later this year, and I'm happy to connect with you and send those to you as well. Okay. Okay, so there's a question about what part of the trial experience do you hear causes the most anxiety for families? Criteria informed consent. I think this really depends. This is a very personal experience for every family. So we've gone through and mapping out this patient journey being involved in a clinical trial, and it really is across the board. But I think what our job as patient engagement leaders is to just identify that there are multiple times that it's going to be, that it can be very stressful and frustrating for them. I think when it comes to the informed consent, making sure that they fully understand all of that, that they have time to read through that, multiple times. Really, we want them to understand exactly what it is that they are signing up for. And I think I've got time for one more question. So what's the biggest challenge you have seen internally and externally in bringing the patient voice more to the forefront of drug development? I mean, I think our biggest challenge right now is just our lack of ability to go out and meet with families. We are typically at conferences and meeting with families and talking to them and learning about their journey. And right now that's been a struggle because we're not actively able to travel and meet with them. And then just letting them understand that we want to be able to hear their story and share it. And I find some patients want to maybe sugarcoat their story if it's something that they want to share, but that's not necessarily what we want to hear. We want to hear how it is exactly day in and day out for those families. Okay. All right, and let's see. I'm trying to scroll through these. Okay, so one of the questions is, please share how you learn as a team and evolve your approach through patient community feedback. So we think that this is a consistent thing that we are always working together as a team. So we involve a lot of different departments when we're looking at patient engagement in clinical trials. So clinical operations, the development programs, and really looking at this from all different sides. I have a very, my mind is set on the patient engagement perspective and bringing all of those perspectives in so that we can really look at them. And then it's taking that information and thinking, what can we do next? And every time we complete that, we also evaluate that. How can we approach the next one? So I think it's always a step-by-step process, and each one adds to being able to further, and better our approach into the next one. And okay, and so last question, what is the most critical and integral task to accomplish for organizations that do not have clinical trials but would want to have trials in the future? I think just making sure that you're bringing patient engagement in at even before this starts. So we've seen the earlier that you can involve patient engagement, the better. And, setting that tone across the company as a whole, that this is a very, a large part of it. This is your ultimate stakeholder. And so setting the tone that patient engagement will be sitting at that table and a leader in all of the decision-making processes, I think we'll be able to, when you do bring those clinical trials in the future, it will be a smoother transition to just being able to bring the patient voice into all of those. All right, so I think we're at time, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. And I hope that you have a great rest of the day attending all the amazing sessions. And I look forward to connecting with you next year in person. And you're always feel free to reach out to me and we connect offline as well. Thank you so much.